his senior ministers. I mean, yesterday we knew that some of them were in here telling him it was over. Michael Gove got sacked for doing that. So when we talk about how this is ending compared to previous prime ministers, Margaret Thatcher had what's been described as the men in grey suits coming to tell her the game was up. Theresa May had Graham Brady tell her the game was up. Boris Johnson had men and women coming to tell him it was over, but he clung on, and it is only now, when all the resignations have reached such a pitch that is really not possible for him to carry on governing the country, we now know that he believes his time in office is over.
Well, Walden's with us. He was the former press secretary to Boris Johnson, has worked with him very closely for a number of years. Hi, good morning. Were you expecting this morning?
Hello, Kay. I've said to you on many occasions in recent months, and I wrote in the Times overnight, that Boris doesn't do change, he doesn't do apology, and he pretty much doesn't do resignation unless it benefits him. And I was getting very worried this morning that he was actually not only trashing his legacy, but trashing the very tenets of democracy. So all I can say to you this morning, Kay, is thank God. You know, he has finally done the right thing, but what a farce. To be dragged kicking and screaming like he is an embarrassment. And what I hope now, I mean, here's the situation, right? Is he going to reappoint the 57 ministers and trade envoys and PPSs as he goes on for the next? This is all totally unnecessary. The writing was on the wall, and I presume he is going to have to reappoint people to cabinet and not give new jobs to people, and that would be the right thing to do. And I do hope when we see the Prime Minister later that instead of the usual guff, because that's what it's become. I'm sorry to say, you know, as an old friend, he knows my views on it all. It has become that. Let's not have all the usual pandering Boris. Let's have a serious, sober statement that the right conclusion has been reached, that he can salvage some of the legacy around Brexit and around Ukraine and around COVID vaccine. Yes, let's give him that, right? But let's also have an orderly transition. And that means making sure that we don't have useless, pointless legislation on the agenda, that they only concentrate on the things that really matter, the stuff like solving the current cost of living crisis, and that we have a sober handover. What we saw last night was beyond farce, you know, dipping hands in blood, the revenge stuff on Michael Gove, pathetic. Absolutely pathetic, I'm sorry to say. And he has now finally seen that the writing is not on the wall. But it has taken the resignation of his education secretary, who must be the shortest serving cabinet minister in history, and his new chancellor telling him the game is up. And I think he's come dangerously close to reaching a point where he would trash his entire legacy. He has an opportunity today, now having resigned, to do the right thing in terms of this speech and the right thing over the next 6 to 12 weeks. And I hope he takes that opportunity, and I hope he does it properly, because that is what will define him going forward.
OK, and as far as what's going on behind us in number 10 at the moment, two questions. What will be happening? Who will be surrounding him? And how will he be feeling?
Most people and most experts, but ultimately he did really step up, didn't he? He led on the vaccine program, which was world renowned. He then moved on to the Ukraine crisis, and he's seen as a leader there. He's held up as a hero in Ukraine. So do you think he's going to bring those two elements as well into whatever he has to say today, which will be about legacy?
Yeah, absolutely. That will certainly be the focus. We've seen the Prime Minister really taking charge on that COVID effort. There were many criticisms around that. Most recently, of course, he has played the statesman in the war of Ukraine, supporting the Ukrainian government. President Zelensky, of course, issuing his thanks to Boris Johnson on numerous occasions. But he also has faced heavy criticism over the last few months. He may not touch on that, but that is certainly something that will be in the minds of many Conservative MPs, opposition MPs, and of course members of the public. The British Prime Minister most recently, of course, directly implicated in the Partygate scandal, which saw numerous twists and turns and chapters. That scandal never seeming to be put to bed. The Prime Minister obviously coming out denying those allegations at first, and later revealed to have actually taken part in those social gatherings and parties himself, and that saw him face that heavy criticism, calls for him to resign also, but he did seem to weather the storm of the Partygate scandal. We've also, of course, seen pretty disastrous and historic historic local election losses for the Conservative Party under Boris Johnson's watch over the last few months. We've seen most recently those by-election losses for the Conservative Party. So many MPs, particularly on the local level, have questioned whether or not the reputation, the integrity of the Prime Minister has perhaps tarnished their roles, their seats in their local constituencies. That has been a key concern for Conservative MPs. And we have heard reaction from a number of MPs already to the Prime Minister's decision to resign. Of course, it is not even 10 o'clock here in London, and we've seen that real snowballing effect of those resignations from that first bombshell resignation announced on Tuesday by the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Health Secretary Sajid Javid. Now, most recently, we are hearing from the former Justice Secretary Robert Buckland saying that Boris Johnson has bowed to the inevitable. The Conservative MP Tobias.
Whether or not we will see more resignations from that top tier of government, the Secretaries of State. And the Prime Minister is really running into trouble here because he now has dozens of jobs of which to replace in his government, and he has not that many on his backbenches to draw from because of the unhappiness with his leadership. He could really struggle to fill a government, and that could weaken him even further. If some of those big names do resign in the next few hours or days, he would struggle to find the caliber of candidate needed to fill those jobs and bring confidence that he is trying to set things right. So an incredibly difficult time for the Prime Minister. He could potentially be in his final few days, but at the moment he seems determined to cling on to power. Vincent McAviney, Euronews, London.
Russia's relentless shelling continues to take a heavy toll on life and buildings in eastern Ukraine. In this case, in the city of Kharkiv. Wednesday saw casualties.
Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, who is seen as one who might have relatively good chances to go through, to the Health Minister, Javid, who stepped down on Wednesday, who also is seen as one of the top runners. And after that, the list just continues. The Foreign Minister, Liz Truss, among them, and so on and so forth. So there is a big melee in the Tory party, and they're all sort of jostling for the first spot. And that is the reason why probably the solution that Boris Johnson is considering now and suggested that he stays on over the summer and all these leadership candidates can sort of try to beat each other to first place may not play out that way. They may want a cleaner solution and trying for a leadership selection next week or the week after that.
On the story for us in London, DW correspondent Barbara Wezel, thank you. Civilian evacuations are underway in Ukraine's Donetsk region, with Russia stepping up its attacks since claiming full control of neighbouring Luhansk. The city of Slovyansk has been...
Japan Hour, Saturday on CMA. Japan Hour is brought to you by Sumitomo Corporation. And Zip Air. Summer fares now available.
This Saturday, silver linings in the crypto deep freeze.
These downturns eliminates the weak players and lets the best players survive.
Counting the cost of rising energy prices for Asian economies.
New details have emerged about the 21-year-old male arrested in connection with the July 4th mass shooting that left 7 dead and 47 injured in the Highland Park suburb of Chicago. Authorities say he contemplated another attack in neighboring Wisconsin while on the run. He has also had past encounters with the police. Our Tony Waterman reports.
Robert Cremo III in court on Wednesday.
A lengthy period with Boris Johnson remaining in office, a sort of big farewell tour, Tony Blair style, would be untenable. If you look in the last few moments, Kwasi Kwarteng, business secretary, has just messaged on Twitter, what a depressing state of affairs, so much needless damage caused. We now need a new leader as soon as practicable, someone who can rebuild trust, heal the country and set out a new, sensible and consistent economic approach to help families. So there you've got a cabinet minister actually going on the record with his concern about any attempt by Boris Johnson to cling on. It's now July. We're talking about Conservative Party conference in October, which is rumoured to be the point at which he, Boris Johnson, is considering saying that he will stand down. But that's a long time for a country to be governed by a caretaker, effectively, Prime Minister. Boris Johnson's wings would be clipped if people knew that he was leaving office. He wouldn't have the full support to make massive decisions, it appears, of lots of Conservative MPs, which is why one of the big questions is just the timetable. Tory MPs are actually pretty confident that they might even be able to whittle down that dozen or so names to the last two that can go to the party in the country by the end of term, I think, as Beth was saying, so July the 23rd. So we've got just under 3 weeks to do that. The sort of knockout rounds in the past have taken just over a fortnight when they've been done at pace, as they were after the Brexit vote in the race that ended up with Theresa May in post. But you do have what is increasingly amongst cabinet ministers a sense of constitutional crisis right now over Boris Johnson's leaving date.
OK, Sam, thanks very much indeed. And so the controversy now moves not from whether the Prime Minister should resign, because he will be, and he'll make a statement later on today, but whether he should be allowed to remain as the interim Prime Minister until a new Prime Minister is chosen, a process that could take several weeks. I'm just hearing from one of my cabinet sources who says, I don't think he should be allowed to stay. I think that Dominic Raab, who is the Deputy Prime Minister, should be allowed to be the caretaker Prime Minister. Joining us now is Lord Heseltine, a former Deputy.
The focus will be on how to send a message to Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who's also attending to protest at the ongoing war. Ukraine's Foreign Minister was also invited, but will only speak online. Regional power plays aplenty among allies and adversaries. Anne Barker, ABC News, Bali.
Here are the top stories on ABC News. There are reports that the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson will resign following an onslaught of resignations in his cabinet. The Prime Minister has lost over 50 ministers on his payroll in less than 48 hours, which make up nearly a third of his government. Health Secretary Sajid Javid began the slew of resignations, stepping down on Tuesday, saying he had lost confidence in Mr Johnson's leadership. All Australians over the age of 30 will be eligible for a fourth COVID vaccine from Monday. The peak vaccine advisory body, ATAGI, is also recommending a fourth jab for those aged 50 to 64, as well as shortening the time between doses to 3 months. Health Minister Mark Butler says 30 to 49-year-olds will also have the option to get the fourth shot. An additional 6 local government areas in New South Wales are now eligible to access natural disaster payments. Adults in the 29 areas impacted by floods can receive a one-off payment of $1,000 plus $400 per every child. Major flooding is impacting parts of the Hunter as well as communities along the Hawkesbury River, which is north of Sydney. Attorney General Mark Dreyfus has ordered the Commonwealth to drop the prosecution of lawyer Bernard Collaery. Mr Collaery was charged with leaking classified information about an alleged Australian spying operation in East Timor. The Canberra lawyer was facing possible jail time, with his trial in the ACT Supreme Court set for October. Just to bring you up to speed, we've got breaking news coming out of the UK that British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is set to resign. We're going to bring in the ABC's Global Affairs editor, Lyons, who joins me now in the studio. John, there's a lot going on at the moment in the UK.
Lara, what an extraordinary night. We're witnessing one of the great political dramas happening right now in London. We're witnessing one of the most colourful politicians the UK has ever seen, Boris Johnson, who's had a dramatic rise and now a dramatic crash to earth. It's been a death by 1,000 cuts. This was the politician who wouldn't die. This was the great Houdini of politics. He survived things that mere mortal politicians wouldn't survive. He survived Partygate. He was in fact charged by the police in relation to that. He was the Teflon Prime Minister. He was indestructible. And in the end, it was cumulative. It was 148 of his own colleagues last month, his own side. So when you look at that British Parliament at question time, 148 of the people sitting on his side wanted him out. He survived. He survived all of the backlash over Brexit. He survived the Sue Gray report into the whole Partygate affair. He survived for 24 hours his two most senior ministers, Sajid Javid and Rishi Sunak. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Health Secretary and the Solicitor General all quit. He survived. 5 ministers all wrote a joint letter, like a suicide pact. He survived. 50 ministers and senior politicians senior officials have now resigned in the last 24 hours. He almost survived, but finally he's bloodied, he's battered, he's beaten, he's lost limbs, but finally it looks like Boris Johnson, his political career has come to an end.
What is it that he has that other Prime Ministers don't have that has allowed him to persevere?
He's not just a politician.